building off that, how do you feel your degree from Mizzou prepared you for your work?
Well, I was already doing the work before I even really started,
Right.
so it was really good preparation. I mean, I wouldn't have gotten the job with the Star if I hadn't worked for the Missourian, and I wouldn't have gotten. I mean, I went from Mizzou to the San Jose Mercury News, and I wouldn't have gotten that job had I not had clips from the Missourian and the Star.
Mm.
So, I mean, I think it was a perfect preparation, really.
What advice would you want to give to the aspiring journalists at Mizzou today?
uh, I think what's different now. I think is that it's helpful to have more to be more multifaceted, right? To be able to write, to be able to do broadcasting, to be able to to work on the web, um, and I think to be able to to take photographs. This is all stuff that was and in many ways still is a complete mystery to me. All I could do is write, and so but I think where it's going. I mean, I'm actually personally very optimistic about the business. I mean, I know that it's. I'm not optimistic about newspapers because newspapers are clearly, you know, I mean, I don't know if they're dying, but they're clearly being overtaken by other mediums. But I think that in many ways the journalism part is the same. It's about gathering information. It's about telling good stories. It's about informing people. It's about getting information that people need, and I think that's always going to exist. The demand for I mean, to me, the demand. What's happening with the mediums is that the demand for information is actually expanding. That somehow the supply of information is influencing the demand, and so there's more of it. And so I think people want information. It's just about how to deliver it.
Right.
And so the more ways you can do that, I think the better situated you're going to be. And so it's hard to specialize like the way I did.
Okay, well, that's all I have for you right now. I think my partner has a couple little more intense questions for you.
Yeah, I
So
kind of researched
get
this.
ready.
Okay. Okay.
I was looking at just like these extensive work you did in the Middle East, and um, have you had the opportunity to work with journalists in the Middle East, and if so, what was that like? I mean, language barrier wise, or just environment and culture wise.
Well, with the journalists, I mean, the Post has an extensive network of reporters and translators
Mm-hmm.
who are on the ground. I mean, it was a little bit different for me because when I first started going to Iraq, I was covering the U.S. military,
Right.
so I didn't really, I was embedded generally, and I wasn't spending, I was so I was talking, I didn't need
Right.
language
Okay.
skills because I was,
Yeah.
everybody I was interviewing spoke English.
Uh huh.
Most people I was interviewing spoke
Uh
English,
huh.
and then when I would be out, I would have some kind of interpreter that the army would be providing.
Okay.
But it was problematic. I mean, that was problematic. It
Uh
was
huh.
difficult in that respect. I mean, for a lot of different reasons.
Uh huh.
But that said, when I did, transition into different types of stories, we rely on those people heavily,
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
really all you can do is admire the incredible courage that these people have. I mean, the Washington Post lost uh, a reporter, last October.
Right.
I was in Baghdad when it happened, and it was devastating. I mean, this was a reporter who everybody knew and loved and had contributed to innumerable stories that had been on the front page of the paper, and he went out and he was just doing his job one day and was killed. So it's really, I mean, and I still, even now, I think it's one of the most underreported aspects of the war is, I think at this point, well over 100 Iraqi journalists have been killed, and so
Mm-hmm.
the sacrifice these people make,
Right.
it's just incredible.
Wow. um, and just well, going off of that, what um, as more of like a personal question, what impact does it have on you traveling so much and being embedded with the troops and having to delve into these issues that have gone unnoticed for so long up until when all these books on Blackwater started coming out, like Jeremy Scahill and that kind of
Right.
thing.
Um, well, by the time I started reporting on private security, um, there had been, I think, it's interesting because I think with regard to private security, my impression was always that the the academic world and and the less mainstream media was ahead of the mainstream media
Uh-huh.
on the issue.
Really?
People like Jeremy and Robert Young Pelton and Deborah Avon and Peter Singer. I mean, those people were well into the research, long before the sort of Blackwater thing became a real issue.
Mm-hmm.
Before Nicer Square.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, personally, I think Iraq generally it inevitably takes a toll on everybody who tries to cover it.
Definitely.
For some reasons that are more obvious than others. I mean, just I spent an inordinate amount of time away from my family,
Mm-hmm.
and I was in a situation that was obviously more dangerous
Right.
than a kind of a normal assignment, and so that
Right.
created more stress on my family,
Mm-hmm.
and uh, and that really does, I think, for everyone, it takes its toll.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think also it's it's incredibly meaningful work. You feel like it's really meaningful work because I think you're I think more so than any time in my career, I just felt like I got into the business, idealizing people like, Bob Woodward, who,
Right.
provided, information that the country really needed.
Yeah.
And I think more so than any time in my career, I felt like I was in that position where, for better or worse, I was the one who was gathering the information and putting it out there, and I felt like that it was our country's war, and that it was important work. So, there's a lot of trade-offs. I think there's a lot of trade-offs that go with it.
Mm-hmm. And then also, I was listening to some interviews on NPR that you had, and just based on like the State Department and I think it was the Coalition Provision Authority, that's like overseeing the regulations of these
Right.
private military contractors. What do you see the future of that? What do you see in the future of that? Do you think how do you think the regulations will pan out for these contractors?
I think it's a really hard question to answer, because I've always felt that, I mean, there's two issues. One is that it's true the regulations have always been murky about um, whether private security contractors fall under, do they fall under civilian law, do they fall under military
Mm-hmm.
law, should their immunity be protected? All those issues I think are valid, but to me, one of the key issues was, even if you had those provisions in place, even if there was clarity surrounding the regulations,
Mm-hmm.
who is going to enforce them? Who is actually going to prosecute, somebody who, is involved in a questionable shooting in the middle of Baghdad?
Mm-hmm.
The military has involved in its own issues, and and I think we're going to find out to a large extent, with the resolution of the Blackwater case with Nicer
Uh-huh.
Square.
Right.
Because we've heard that there have been, possible indictments coming down,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to be, if they do, it's going to be, I think it's going to be difficult to prosecute those cases.
Mm-hmm.
This is a shooting that took the lives of 17 Iraqis in the middle of, a war.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Obviously, there are a number of questions surrounding the way the shooting took place, but
Right.
the question is, how do you not only investigate that, but if you indict, how do you prosecute? How do you get witnesses?
Mm-hmm.
How do you get witness testimony? Is that testimony useful and valid?
Right.
You know, it seemed to take some time for people to even get to the crime scene. What happened to the crime scene by the time they got there? In the
Mm-hmm.
interim period. Um, and then who's going to prosecute them? Like the way the provisions, as I understand them,
Mm-hmm.
they're it's the prosecutor in the jurisdiction of the the residency of the accused who's
Huh.
responsible for prosecuting the case.
Right.
So say you had 6 guys who were being prosecuted out of
Mm-hmm.
Blackwater. I think as my understanding, those guys would have to be prosecuted in 6 different locations.
Right.
So I think it's gonna be really interesting to see how it shakes down. But it's a long answer to your question to say I don't know,
Yeah.
really.
Couple final questions for you. First one being, did you actually set out to win the Pulitzer with this story, or was it just luck and skill and kind of a blessing?
Oh well, I mean, I think somebody said it today. Like the idea that you could set out to win the Pulitzer Prize. It's like, I mean, I don't even know how you would start, really. But I do think that it is aspirational more than anything. It's like you think, well, what would it be like to win the Pulitzer Prize? But I don't think you ever really think it could happen to, or at least I didn't think it could ever happen to me. Um, I think more than anything, it's about I don't know. It's about doing the work, really. It's about setting out to do the stories, and really, like when I set out with this thing, it was originally just going to be one story.
Mm-hmm.
We had an idea to look into private security and and try to figure out what that was, and I was just going to go and do one story,
Mm-hmm.
and then it ultimately became a bunch of stories.
Right.
So um, I don't know how I can't remember how you put it, but it was more like it was a combination of a lot of different things. I think a lot of it too is sort of the altitude of the story because I think if I had done these stories all year and Blackwater, the Blackwater incident had not happened in September, I mean, that created a whole new line of stories.
Mm-hmm.
And, it also was sort of an event that crystallized for everyone sort of that it was an important issue in the war.
Mm-hmm.
And we were already on it. We were, just because we had started working it, we were ahead of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think that helps. So it's luck. I mean, I would never say that it's luck that some 17 people got killed, in a Baghdad traffic circle, but I just don't know whether I don't think that the story would have had the same the same resonance
Mm-hmm.
if that event had not happened.
Do you know where you're going to keep your Pulitzer Prize?
Well, it's like I don't even know I don't even know what it is every year, but they give you you get a check, and then and they give you like sort of a glass. I wouldn't even call it like it's an oversized, I don't know what you'd call it. Like it's not a paperweight per se, but it's a statuette, and I don't know. It's sitting on my desk now. So
Wow. Well, congratulations on that. I mean, I really, really honestly enjoyed reading your series
thanks,
on the contractors. That was fantastic.
thanks.
All right.